watched the talk that I gave yesterday about the high-level architecture. At Native Instruments today, we wanted to deep dive into micro frontends and how we're using that at Native Instruments. So the presentation has been prepared by Eilhard and Alex Shubitidze. And Björn couldn't make it, unfortunately, this time, so I'm going to do my best to replace him. The rest of the team consists of 5 back-end engineers, 5 front-end engineers, and 1 automation engineer. We were greatly supported by our agency partner, Marc, and all of these people were highly involved in implementing the micro front-end infrastructure. So just to recap quickly what system landscape we have. Obviously, we're using Ibexa, it's our core DXP. We have a legacy CMS based on Type 3. We're using, since already a decade or more, Magento. We've built a custom storefront, if you want so, based on React. And we have a bunch of custom APIs going to backends. There are a couple of systems in the backend that are connected. And then, so these are basically the services. I wouldn't call them microservices. It's more like a service architecture. And then we have multiple different domains served differently, namely nativeInstruments.com, isotope.com, pluginalliance.com, and also Brainworks Audio. We are probably only touching on isotope.com today because this is the most migrated one. I mean, it's completely migrated to the new landscape based on Ibexa, Magento, and the React frontend. Native Instruments is currently being migrated, but not actually done yet. And the rest needs to come in future. So, deep diving into the infrastructure. I already mentioned that yesterday on a higher level. Now, one step further, when requests coming in, the first touch point is our CDN based on Akamai. We also have a web applications firewall established on that. The second step is our proxy, which is based on HA proxy. It's also the step where we actually configure where the request is going to, basically, or which system is basically answering the request. This is highly configurable. I mean, everyone who knows a bit about HA proxy knows the power behind that. We have several configurations on HA proxy. One is about Ibexa. We also have Magento configuration there. We have the React frontend application configuration there. And there are a couple of other requests that we don't need to mention here. But HA proxy is a super important application in the landscape. So in this context, we're looking into the request that goes into the Ibexa application, basically. Ibexa, when necessary in the rendering process, then triggers a request to another server or micro frontend server and asks for one specific React component, which is then fully rendered on that level and returned back into Ibexa, into the rendering process of Ibexa, and Ibexa can then embed that in their rendering process and returns the full page to the client. This is also true for the React application. In going into the consequences or the idea behind that in a second. So we wanted to have one unified store for shared components. So the React application can also request at the same time, in the same way like Ibexa, specific React components, and it returns the whole page, just similar to what Ibexa is doing. And then we do have for anything that is necessary to be rendered on the front end or hydrated, as you said, say on the front end, we do have a GraphQL server, which connects once again to Ibexa and to Magento API, besides a bunch of other systems, for example, also Egolia, which I mentioned yesterday, and again, some other backend services. So it compiles the whole response. I mean, I don't know, GraphQL is probably known. And then with one response, there's the request from the front end, basically, in that sense. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe just quickly, who already heard of micro frontends in the past? Already, there are a bunch. Cool, so basically, I mean, we collected two different definitions. I'm not going to read them out. There are basically two ways of implementing micro frontends. The first one is in build time. And you basically isolate the development of components, and then you can collect them on build time and build multiple pages or just bigger components out of them in build time and render them all together afterwards. And then there is the second one where you basically just build them separately and also can serve them separately. This is pretty much what we are doing, as described earlier. So we wanted to be able, because we have a front-end application and a back-end application with Ibexa that are both rendering pages, and we do have obviously things that are needed on both sides. Like for example, the header. We're going to look into that later. And obviously we don't want to maintain two separate headers for both applications that render pages. And that's the reason why we came up with the micro front-end architecture. So both sides can basically request the same application, and we only need to maintain one code source, basically. Yep. So, and you see that here we are using micro front-end components in both ways from Ibexa side. One is in the Twig template itself, like for example the header. This is baked into the template, as you know, in Twig. And then, but also we are using them as components in Ibexa. So the editor, they can decide where to put certain components in the page builder, configure them in a specific page block, and then Ibexa is requesting the component with all the configuration that the editor gave from the micro front-end server and renders it out, as explained earlier. Great, and now Alex is going into more details on how that all is working.
So I will demonstrate two our micro front-end components. Let's start with header micro front-end component. But before we dive into integration, let's zoom into integration flow in Ibexa. So Ibexa renders the page. Then Ibexa requests the HTML from micro frontend. micro frontend communicates with GraphQL, which is our gateway to our various systems. When micro frontend will fetch all necessary data, it generates HTML, and finally Ibexa renders received HTML as is. Now we can have a look on integration. This code example demonstrates how we composing the HTML. Header component is relatively simple as it does not contain dynamic data and it's mostly static data. That's why it's nothing overly complex, and for example in this code example we are rendering navigation HTML, for example. This is our micro frontend. It is another front-end application which is hosted on our Google Cloud Run. We are server-side rendering all necessary HTML together with JavaScript and CSS. Server-side rendering is important for SEO, that search engines can properly index the content. As we see here, it does not contain styles and interactive functionalities, but as Marc mentioned, under our domain, HI proxy maps all necessary components all together. And with given parameters, micro frontend renders HTML respectively. For example, we have Germany selected in country selector, but if we change the parameter, now we see that Spain is selected. Because we have a lot of systems which are interconnected to each other, we needed to implement some UI components in this, different systems, and we faced the challenge to not to introduce redundancy. That's why we introduced the design system, which is the central place where all our systems are connecting, which ensures the reusability and also makes sure the streamline changes across all our systems. This is our design system. Actually, we maintaining all necessary UI components in the one place. Now let's see integration in Ibexa. This is header tweak template, which initiates requests to micro frontend. And with given tweak template path, it renders the received HTML. This is the code example which illustrates how we do request against micro frontend, and with given path, it renders HTML as is. This is the tweak template where we receive HTML and render exactly as is. That's all about micro front-end header component. Now we can see plan selector micro component. Our subscription product has different plans. And this class selector is a little bit more complex as data coming from different sources, and then we are mapping all data all together. Each class of the subscription product are represented by Ibexa PIM, where we maintaining all kind of content related to the plan. We also injecting plan selector micro frontend into a page builder, where we adding some additional settings, some additional content, and we are also mapping PIM products into the page block. And we also add some design options and all necessary parameters. Now we can play a little bit with our GraphQL playground. Our GraphQL API is a gateway to our different backend systems. So this is the plan subscription plans query, for example, and with given variables, it fetches data from different backend systems and maps all together. In the end, frontend is using this data. For example, if we change the variables, for example, I want to fetch only one plan, it will just fetch one product from the Ibexa. And also we can see that we are fetching three plans, which is represented as a Ibexa PIM product entry, and with given variables, it fetched the information. This is implementation in our GraphQL server. So this is the place, for example, when we are connected to Ibexa GraphQL itself. For example, we request the products from the Ibexa GraphQL API. This is the query of Ibexa GraphQL API, and then we fetch all necessary data from Ibexa and map in our GraphQL server. That's all also about plan selector component, but also we have other components, like we have footer micro frontend component, product cards, and audio player. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions? Just realized we haven't really touched on the other side, right? The micro front-end server. I mean, we can talk about that maybe at a coffee if you're interested. Yeah.
Is your micro front-end solution is like a midterm solution, and you are planning to move to the SPAs, or it's a permanent?
So, I mean, we haven't yet decided how long. I mean, as always, certain implementation have a certain lifetime, but it's not yet clear how long this solution will survive. We haven't defined that yet. So it might stay for quite a while.
I'm asking because it looks like quite complex. You have a block definition and then template, and then when template gets rendered, you have a request to the micro front-end server. The micro front-end server makes the request to the Ibexa to fetch the data for the plans, then renders everything, then brings back to the Ibexa. It's quite complicated, as if you had like a standalone app which would simply fetch data from the API.
Yeah, well, I can't hide that it's quite complex. It's true. But it works.
Is it fast?
Sorry?
Is it fast
Yeah.
enough?
I mean, it's all cached, right? I mean, it's not like all requests are going through the whole process, right? Whenever the Ibexa has all the data for one specific request, then the second request is cached. We don't go into the micro front-end server once again for each request. So it's, yeah.
The background for my question is that we do basically the same, but we didn't build this page builder experience. We have a preview app for the whole content page with everything we have. It's also complex, but we want to move to the SPA. And it's just
yeah, the idea, I mean, the thought behind bringing that into the page builder was that we wanted to enable editors to be flexible with even React components, smart components on the front end. And this is basically the way we came up with that.
Yes. So you're doing like a mix between an headless in which we wouldn't use the page builder, you use it, so you have the flexibility, but everything is rendered elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's kind of headless, but you have the flexibility and the edition of the page builder. Okay.
In far future, what I could envision, maybe responding to your first question, what could replace that solution at some point would be if Ibexa would be able to nicely be integrated with something like Next, right? I mean, that would be amazing if we could organize rendering processes with the editing abilities of Ibexa and then the rendering abilities of something like Next. That would be great. Then we could basically implement everything like that. Yeah. Or
I've got a question about the React app pages. That is that consuming HTML from the microservers as well, or is that reacting directly somehow with your React component library?
Not quite sure if I got the question right. So yes, the React pages are also consuming micro front-end components, but on server side, right? So they are not dynamically fetching HTML from the micro front-ends.
Okay, so it's going straight from React app and it's just importing classes and components.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I might be wrong there. It's not like including React components. It's just as Ibexa is doing it after everything is compiled into HTML. It fetches the HTML and the JavaScript, the compiled JavaScript from the micro-frontend component, and then renders it out. It's not like on build time, on React update time. It's on refresh time.
I see.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a React expert, but how do you manage hydration? Is that an issue?
No.
Because when you're consuming, like, if I understand it, like, we have a dedicated service that just fills out this HTML part,
Yeah.
and I can assume that it's quite, it has all this body and everything, so it's being initialized within the and then you have a separate component that's basically the same. So you render out the same thing and just add them next to each other, right? Let's say below each other, and so you got this one component, then you got the other component and the other component, and it's not an issue to have these multiple instances.
All I can say, and I'm not the React front-end expert either.
There's two of us.
It's been solved by our front-end expert. But I'm not quite sure how. Do you know how they
Inside React application, those components are injected exactly as is. And for example, there is some issues with other other React components, but we do hydrating also after we inject this component. So for example, the micro frontend generates the first JavaScript version, but then hydration, for example, interacts with that. For example, when you change this component, then hydration works on top on that.
So it knows, as far as I understood, the hydration knows about all the different components on the side already. Yeah.
But I might be also wrong. I'm also not front-end engineer as well.
Sorry. We couldn't bring additional from the developer.
Do components share a state? Is there any kind of event path where you say you have a product card with add to cart button, and then you have the icon in the header? So
Good question. Yes, they share states. Certain aspects of the states are shared across
and it
all.
also works in the page builder.
Well, it doesn't need to be. I mean, you mean in the rendering of the page builder? You mean?
No, I mean like as soon you assemble your page, like that it's an app, and there is like interaction between components. Things must be dynamic and everything. And do you have, like, if I understand correctly, you have this kind of integration between components, but do you have also this like full app functionality also inside the page builder?
I mean, inside the page builder, or the editor is basically injecting the state of that certain component. What do you mean? And then when the page is rendered, this state is being shared with the overall.
I mean, like I build a page, and I see my header, I see my product cart as an editor, and then I click add to cart or add to shopping list, and want to see that it works in fact, and I see the new icon or the numbers there. And is it available in page builder? Like, do the editor have the full customer
experience? Not in the page builder.
No,
obviously not. I mean, you can't switch from one page to another in the page builder anyway. So that doesn't make sense anyway. So that doesn't work in the page builder. No.
Okay. Thank you.
One question about all of this process, because you have many components, and for sure it's better for maintenance, for interoperability and so on. But how many websites or how many pages or different apps do use all this to so we can understand that the cost to implement all this is really a good has really a good return of the investment in the end. Because what we always say when we see Eilhard's approach is it's more complex and
Yeah.
as a technical side.
Yeah.
So how could you tell us about that to
Yeah. So actually, the implementation wasn't that huge of an issue at all. It wasn't that much of because there are, when it comes to the micro front-end server, there are existing solutions for that already. And we based our solution on something like that we found quite usable. And then the most effort we had was on Ibexa side, requesting at the same at the right place, requesting and configuring the whole parameter handover of parameters and so the details. But the rough workflow was already set with all the components. That was not that hard to implement. And we started with the most obvious components, as you just said, the header and the footer. And then we extended that with an AB audio player, for example, or the plan selector. And so far we follow the rule that as soon as the editor needs to be flexible in setting up something that is more dynamic than what is in place with Ibexa, we consider that a potential micro front-end component. Does it make sense? Yeah.
I have one question. The experience of update cycles. How fast would it be to update, let's say, a piece of front end?
This.
Let's say coding. You got the designer say, okay, we want to have it like a bit more space here. Just pick any example. Say, okay, we implement this and we roll it out. What do you think? How long is the time to actually go to market with this change?
It depends on the change, obviously, how complex the change is, but as soon as the change is implemented on front-end component side, the only thing that is missing is increasing the version on the request on Ibexa side. We deploy Ibexa with that increase, and then everything is done, pretty much. We have version management on the micro front-end server side, so we can first deploy the new version. The old version still remains, and then as soon as Ibexa is deployed, it picks up the new version after some caching periods, but it will usually take.
So you manage deployment to avoid dependencies that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.